Welcome to Hello Player, a show for curious people who want an honest look at making a video game. I'm your host, Ava Carr, and in this episode we'll be talking about the highly contentious topic of difficulty when designing HyperDot. So let's get started. We have a guest today.
Hello, my name is Nicolaas.
Tell us who you are and what you do.
I am the Director of Insights at Glitch, and I do all of our player behavior research, market insights, basically anything we need to find out to make the best decision possible.
How do you typically work with Charles?
Oh. It's a lot of arguing, just straight screaming at each other.
Oh my goodness, the amount of scream matches that we've been in.
Yeah, about how to order the levels in HyperDot. Wow.
We had to be separated.
Yep.
We just, yeah. Okay, yeah, none of that's true. I'm sorry.
No, it's very cordial. Here's my spreadsheet. Tell me what you think.
Yeah.
That's so many notches down from we're screaming at each other to
screaming digitally.
Yes, digitally.
Here's
yes.
some spreadsheets.
All caps. All
yes,
the time.
all caps. There are some periods to emphasize stern.
Yes.
Yes.
Does that actually happen? No. Oh, God. Okay. I can never tell with you two. Half the time you're actually sarcastic, and then the other times you're being serious.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I can't even tell how you collaborate.
Yeah. This is in our entire conversations are just sarcasm.
Yep.
Oh,
yeah.
God.
Well, this is how we are in Battlefield, too.
Yes, we also play Battlefield, and we're just super sarcastic.
Yeah. And I'm screaming at you not to revive me, but you run into gunfire.
Yes, to revive you.
Die above my body.
Because we're squad mates.
When we were playing Apex Legend, that actually happened too, where I was like, Charles, don't come revive me. I'm useless.
I'm a squad
and he still
mate.
comes in. Okay,
Goodness.
Anyways, on the topic of difficulty.
Oh, yes, difficulty.
So everybody, tell me a little bit about what y'all think when you hear the concept of difficulty when designing for video games. And especially as two designers and a researcher, what does difficulty actually mean to you?
I'm so bad at describing this because I'm so unsure and I've read so much at this point.
That's not a bad thing.
I know.
It's
just
okay
become more unclear the more I've read, though.
Well, I think that's actually really cool. Why do you feel that it's more unclear? Because you've done so much research on it. Mm-hmm. Just talk to us a little bit about why that feels so unclear to you.
I think it's just such a personal thing, how much challenge a person wants to encounter and how much they're comfortable with. So when we talk about designing for difficulty, I feel like it is a very personal thing.
I love that because that was going to be my answer.
Now you have to come up with your own answer.
Now I have to come up with something new, but I agree. Anyways.
I agree. That's not
I agree,
a new...
that's fine. Charles, what about you?
For years.
Oh, God. This is a very long monologue.
Years. Long time. For a long time, I always felt I guess I had some type of grasp on what difficulty was. Whereas Super Meat Boy, that's a hard game. I understand. That's a difficult game. Or I was Kirby's Epic Yarn, that's easy, no problem. Or Prince of Persia, the Xbox 360 one. That one's a middle tier kind of difficulty. You're not gonna lose if you die, if you fall off the thing. You'll just be set back right where you were. So I felt like I had an idea of what difficulty was, and then I started making more games, and then I was I don't know what difficulty is at all. Largely because what you said, Nick, where it was this is a very personal thing where especially if in the most extreme cases for HyperDot, things that I find really easy are extremely hard for people.
Yeah.
Largely because I've been working on this game for a long time.
And you are you too, right? That's one of the biggest things is and coming back to what Nicolaas was saying too, it feels like it's deeply personal. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I have an idea of if I were to think of some people that I know who are not super into video games and stuff, if I were to say, or if somebody said make an easy game, I would probably think of those people where I was how would I have it so that they're engaged and focus on them to make an easy so many air quotes,
Yeah.
game, I would think of like a particular person. That would make it more personal, I guess.
Yeah, I would have no clue where to start if someone told me, oh, make a quote unquote easy game or make a quote unquote hard game. And I'd end up asking way more questions than anything. Just be like,
Sure.
well, easy for who?
Yeah.
Like hard for who? And in what genre?
Yeah,
And that's where my stance is on it.
definitely.
In terms of like designing for difficulty, you've talked about HyperDot a lot as being a pretty damn challenging game. What were you thinking of? What were you taking into consideration when you were making HyperDot?
Sure. So I guess I didn't originally think that, or I didn't originally like start out with this is going to be a really hard game, because originally it wasn't meant to be a really long game. It was just to have a normal, quote unquote, normal mode and a hard, still all the air quotes.
Yeah, just
hard
assume
mode.
that everything is in air quotes when we say easy, hard, medium. Because
Yeah, it definitely depends on that. And where I was just trying to illustrate, if you don't have any anti-piracy techniques in your video game, it's really hard. So I just made it like ridiculously, you're not going to last that long. But at the same time, I also said, well, here's just normal. And then when I was playing it myself and testing, I was like, well, I can last like a decent amount of time in this. And I don't want to have them like being there for 50 minutes and stuff. So I was like, yeah, this is a decent amount of time. When I actually showed the game as a presentation, people were not lasting long or nearly as long as I thought they would be.
so it was a lot shorter than you thought.
Yes. Yeah. I was like, oh, this is harder than I thought. Because, again, I've been playing it for a while, and I play these kind of games.
Do you remember the seconds that you thought was hard versus like how long someone would last in your class?
Yeah. So I think on average, I was getting like 30, 35 seconds in that first prototype for normal mode. But when I showed the game and I had people actually play it, they were lasting like 15 to like maybe 12 seconds in normal mode, which is like, oh no, what does that mean for my hard mode? Are they going to, like, is it going to be as hard or as easy as it is? See, that's where the like, it's interesting to try and figure out, is it going to be of the same like level of difficulty as normal? And then I found out, no, they lasted like 5 seconds.
Yeah, that's nothing.
Yeah, and it was like, oh, wow, okay, well, okay, I did not have like a clear grasp on that. I thought they would last maybe 12 to 15 seconds for hard mode. So yeah, it was a lot of me overestimating / I was coming in at it from a person who's played a bunch of games like this. And who worked on the game and has been playing it for a while. So it was harder for me to just out of those two levels, the first two levels I ever made, to figure out the difficulty, let alone over 100 of these. So
What do you think makes the game quote unquote difficult or really challenging? Like, what were some of the design considerations?
a lot of those were like the different modifiers that are in the game. So whether or not you're really big this time or you're super fast this time, or the enemies, so the pattern that the enemies show up in. So, this time you have a whole bunch of squares. There's now a lot of triangles and things like that. There was a lot of things that I used to modulate the difficulty. But again, it depends on, like, it's hard to have like a defined ranking system of those things as difficult.
Yeah. Did you...
It's impossible.
Yeah, like I'm super curious now, like when you were creating like the modifiers and also the enemies, how did you know when something was too, how did you know when something was too challenging or something was too quote unquote simple. Like I'm
Sure.
keep air quoting all of these things,
Yeah.
right? Because like, yeah.
Yeah, it was. I guess it was similar to how I mentioned how I would approach if somebody said, "Make an easy game." I would think of a particular person. I would think of like, oh, if my cousin played this, who doesn't play games nearly as often, or it doesn't have as much experience with like games and stuff. Like, how would I make a level that would be engaging to them? But like what I think that they would enjoy, I guess, or like enjoy in terms of like difficulty level, and that is like I'm trying to base it off of like another person or something like that. Oftentimes I'm trying to do that. So like if I'm saying like I want to make a really hard level, I would think of the like some of the best people who have played the game and be like, okay, now I need to make an even harder level just to be like I'm like it's a challenging thing for them, because I know that there are people out there like myself who enjoy like a lot of, oh, I need to like overcome this like really hard level, but I'm thinking of like particular person, and sometimes that's just me. I'm thinking of myself like, oh yeah, this is kind of cool, or oh, this is a little difficult and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But you're optimizing for engagement.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
For different profiles of people, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And how much difficulty or challenge they can tolerate.
Yeah.
Before either getting bored with like your high skilled player that you're mentioning, or your cousin that doesn't play as many of these games.
Yeah.
Like what level of difficulty can they tolerate before they'll be overwhelmed or underwhelmed?
Yeah.
All I can think of right now is that we're dancing around this concept, or these concepts of like concepts in game design of like flow and progression.
Oh,
Do you all want to take a little bit of time to talk about that?
Sure.
I mean, I think there's a lot of graphs like this where there's like an optimal level of challenge. There's an optimal level of, there's a theory called zone of proximal development that goes through this. Like there's an optimal amount of challenge you can encounter in order to learn at the best rate. And that's the closest theory that I've found to what we're trying to do with HyperDot in optimizing the amount of challenge for each person. But everybody's graph is different. Like some people have like a very steep like curve that they want. Like they want it to be hard from the outset. Some people want the curve to be much less steep. They want to be eased into it and eventually hit a challenge. So we're just designing for a lot of different curves that people have for engagement.
Yeah. And one of the other like interesting design challenges that particularly HyperDot has is that there's like a wide range of people that would be interested, and I've seen play from my cousin who doesn't play a whole bunch of games to this person who like beat Toho on the hardest difficulty last week for the 15th time or something like that. So like trying to find that balance it's really hard to be like, oh, well, how do I have benefits for both of those, or have like an engaging game for both of those?
I have been watching you both kind of like go back and forth with a ton of different types of testing. Can you talk to me a little bit about what that looks like and what you're actually doing without like going into too much of the nuts and bolts, just for our listeners' sake, or at least like explaining it?
Sure.
Yeah.
I can explain before Nick showed up.
He like magically
It was like,
appeared.
yeah, before Nick magically appeared. Before, when I was just working on my own, I was going up to friends and saying, "Hey, could you play these levels of that I have?" I had about 30 levels at like the time where I was really going out to get more feedback about like difficulty and stuff. And I just was like checking to see, oh, how long does it take for you to get through all of these levels, or how far can you get within 30 minutes, or and stuff like that. See where or which levels are super hard, where like the majority of people like lose. And then they're like, oh, okay, I'm done. And then they walk away or something like that. Actually, most of the time they didn't do that because they were friends, and they were like, "Oh, I'll keep
I'll
playing.
force my way through it.
Yeah, I'll just keep going, no problem." So yeah, there was a lot of that, but I didn't really have a lot of like concrete data. It was just me watching them, and I was like, okay, I can adjust that. And that was kind of what like me just doing random play tests or going to conventions and doing play tests and stuff
where
like
we
that.
could.
Yeah, it was just like, oh, I'll do. Or I'll just look and observe and see like, oh, people really don't like the triangles, or ice levels are hard, and things like that. So there was that before then, but then Nick showed up.
For
I mean,
science.
Science.
I would argue that you were doing the right thing already anyways. Like a lot of what I've been doing is just taking more notes.
Sure.
So that we can refer back to why we made the decisions we did.
Sure. Yeah.
In terms of like all the analytics that we're gathering and such, like hopefully we have some historical data about how difficult things have been. But at the same time, like the samples that we get of people who play it are very specific.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
until we launch, we won't really know how our theoretical planning of the levels goes.
Yeah.
Because we probably haven't hit the extremes of the people that will be playing the game.
Yeah, we definitely haven't. I'm so excited for that, by the way.
I'm so nervous for that.
I mean, like, I'm excited and nervous,
Yeah.
but I'm so excited to see what it's going to be like when people hit, what you're calling the levels.
The really hard levels in the game.
Yeah.
There's a name which we won't talk about yet, but
Yeah.
y'all will see that when you see it.
Yes.
Yeah. But your data is only as good as like the sample that you're able to collect. And if we had a lot more resources, we would recruit a lot more people to test it.
Sure. Yeah.
And we'd spend a lot more time like going over the data and adjusting the difficulty of the levels based on like where are people getting stuck, where are people getting frustrated, which levels are they really enjoying. But
No. Yeah.
yeah, I think we've done a really good job, and we have a really good theory for how things will play out, and we've organized levels in a very clear fashion. Like it makes sense why we made the decisions we did, and we wrote down why we made those decisions, so we can go back to it afterwards. And
like, why did we think that?
yeah,
There's this like really big part of me that wants to talk a little bit about those spreadsheets, and I don't know how much we should go into it. Like, because I don't want to like ruin the experience of the game with all of like the science behind it.
Sure.
So it's kind of like, what do we do? Like, do we tell people a little bit about it or not?
I guess in the abstract,
Okay.
A lot of it was just figuring out because a lot of the levels were already made before Nick got here.
Yep.
So it was like just like cataloging. Oh, you did these things in all of these levels. Just doing that alone was like super useful. I didn't know what I did in all these levels.
I love that so much. Like, breaking down each of the levels was really lovely.
Yeah, I'm good at data entry. I've done it for a long time.
So there was a lot of that, and just doing that was super useful. But then, like looking at the like list of like modifiers that I introduce, and the enemies that I introduce and stuff like that, and trying to figure out, does it make sense to have these things in this order because you did like XYZ here, but you haven't really like shown XYZ things before. So like, then maybe I should readjust and things like that. I had like some type of inkling of doing these things, but I didn't have concrete numbers and stats and stuff.
And like the suggestions I have made are based on data, like observational data from how other popular games have been designed. And I don't know what their outcomes were.
Sure.
Yeah, they never freaking post their outcomes. There's only like a few that have.
Yeah. But a lot of the time, like people are only interested in sales numbers. Like they're not interested in how many people have finished the game or how far players have progressed. And like as a researcher, that is one of my main goals, is to make sure that people experience the whole game and don't hit those moments of like, oh, all right, I'm just stuck.
Yeah, like
Bye.
the moment of leaving, like
Yeah.
the exiting moment, because we want people to be able to enjoy the game. Yeah.
Yeah. So the more people that make it to the end and make it to the like that is my
God
win
damn it,
state.
Nick! You didn't. No.
Well, you can edit it out. Just bleep it out.
Then bleep it out.
all good.
Just bleep it out.
It's all good.
No, bleep it out. It'll be good.
The plonk.
Yeah, just a very long beep.
Yes.
Ideally.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm hopeful that we will have some data to either support or reject my hypothesis
Sure.
for organizing the levels, because it's largely based on those previous games and learning theories that I'm familiar with.
Sure.
Where I'm trying to introduce players to concepts at a reasonable pace, but also asking them to combine them.
Right. Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about like how I'm super curious, how did you all know when something was quote unquote too hard or too simple? And you don't. Okay, y'all are shaking your head at me.
Yeah.
Like that was the biggest frowny face.
Yeah. So like when I was making modifiers and I was making enemies and things like that, I had ideas and concepts of what was like hard and what was easier.
And what were those?
um,
Because I'm super
Sure,
curious.
yeah.
Like when before Nick magically popped out of
yeah,
the box.
just was like, hey,
Hey,
what's up? My ideas of that was like squares, easiest. They're so easy.
They're like squirrels.
They're like the inside jokes. They're like they're so easy. They just move in a straight line. That's the easiest thing.
but
And
there's
then-
lots of them sometimes.
Yeah, there's lots of them. They're scary in numbers, but
like squirrels.
oh my goodness. Yeah, so like there's like I was like, yeah, that's not all that hard. But then things like in the original game, the hardest thing that I put in there were triangles because they followed you. I was like, oh yeah, that's harder. That's definitely a harder thing. But the same thing goes with modifiers, where I was like, oh, I'll just make you bigger. That's harder. Make you smaller. Oh, that must be easier. Or I'll make you slower, which is harder. Maybe it's easier. I don't know. That one was, those one were like more amorphous to whether or not they are hard or easy. But then I was like, oh yeah, dark mode. That's hard, but it's not too hard. Or like ice. That's hard. But as I like list off all of these things, there have been multiple times where I have been proven wrong that dark mode is way harder than ice mode for some people. And like squares were tricky for a lot of people. And I was like, what? They're not as hard. But like to me, they're not as hard because my sense is coming from like the angle of, oh, this is the order in which I made these things. Or, this is how I rank these things in my head. So then I tried to do the same thing with the level progression and stuff, where I was like, oh, well, I'll introduce squares and then I'll do triangles, or I'll introduce dark and then I'll do ice. But I've been proven wrong multiple times where it's like, oh, no, it's really hard for
Folks with low vision.
Yeah, for low vision. Whereas like, oh, dark mode is just like super hard for them to the point of where they weren't able to even progress. And I was like, oh, that's that's terrible. I don't want you to not be able to progress, especially just from like you not being able to just see, period. So then I was like, oh yeah, I definitely want to be able to be like, well, I guess I don't really know what is hard and what is easy because it, like you said, it's really personal.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Nick, on the data side, like, did you and Charles talk about like what you saw on the back end, and how did you decide? What were there metrics that you were measuring? How did you decide if something was quote unquote challenging or something was you know.
I think that will come once the game launches. Like
Okay.
once we have enough data to make those types of informed decisions. And
But-
then
During the early testing, you didn't
we don't have data on like the later levels. We have data up to like level 50,
30, right?
but the data gets very sparse past 25. So like there are ways that we could use statistics to like weight all of the different modifiers and shapes to look at what is contributing to difficulty across a lot of people and use that to order levels. But that, I don't know, like it's very time intensive and we need a lot of data to do that. So we can't do it prior to launch. And ultimately, like there are peaks and valleys to the difficulty in each trial or the difficulty across trials. And really they only get difficult when you start mixing them. And we don't have like a difficulty value assigned to each modifier and shape.
Yeah.
So they interact in ways that are unpredictable.
Yeah, and those interactions might be easy for someone else or really hard for someone else.
Yeah, and even if they are really hard for someone might really enjoy that.
Yeah.
Like we saw, I remember sitting there behind
yeah.
somebody at playtest. Which level were they playing? Do you remember?
27.
You were standing there watching it with me.
Level 27.
What was the name of it though?
The level that you're referencing with
Was not
at
27.
playtest was not 27.
Yeah.
Wasn't it figure 8, I think?
It was not figure 8. The one that they were stuck on, I believe it was ambush.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, ambush is also one of the earliest levels that I made. I think it was the second level I made. Yes, that I ever made aside from the first two from the early prototype. But
he sat there playing for a good half hour on that one level.
Yeah.
He died 100+ times. And
Yeah.
then he stood up and he was like, yeah, that was fun.
Yeah,
I
and
enjoyed
when you
that.
say 100+ times, I know you're not exaggerating because on the back end we saw that it was
I was sitting
over
there
100
tallying
times.
it.
Oh, you were
Yeah.
tallying. All right.
we had multiple ways
There
to
were
check.
multiple ways of checking
Yeah.
that this person died over 100 times and they were having fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this gets into like the whole personal thing.
Yeah.
Like some people may die 5 times and put it down.
Yeah,
Some people may die hundreds of times in a level and just have
have a
they
blast.
have
Yeah.
patience for this type of game. They enjoy figuring out
Yeah,
the solution to the level or the trial. And that is not something we can predict.
Yeah.
yeah. No, I'm one of those people. I really like doing that.
And I can't handle puzzles in games.
Sure,
I'm
yeah.
just done with them.
As soon as he has like, yeah, no, I understand. That's
Yeah.
it's really interesting. One time when I was at a convention, it really stuck with me where there was like, for the longest time, I thought that the first level that is in the game was like super easy. It was like, wow, this seems like really, really easy. I probably should not make it this easy because it seems like it's not at all. It just seems like you're just stepping through to get to the next level. That is the level of easy that I thought it was. And it took this person 25 minutes to get to a point where their parent was like, well, we have to go. But they were still playing and they were
Yeah.
still having a whole bunch of fun. But they were still on that level. And I was like, oh, I have no idea what the concept of
Yeah,
difficulty is. Where I'm like, oh goodness sake, that it's stuck with me. Where I'm like, oh
Yeah.
wow, there's a lot of different ranges of difficulty to different people.
Yeah, 100%. So that's a wrap for the episode. Is there anything that you all would want to say to our listeners on the topic of difficulty and HyperDot?
Tell us which trials you think are really difficult.
Yes, we have been talking about in like the past, or I guess we've been doing in the past. It's like, oh, we haven't seen what it's like because it's not out yet. So, future listeners out there, please send in all the tweets. share or docked us on Discord. Hey, look at that. And like,
Hey, look at that.
hey, look at that.
You
I
did
did
it.
it. And like, send me like all this stuff because I'm super interested into figuring out what exactly people like, which levels people find like super hard or just they find interesting or fun, and it's just, you know, I just want to hear feedback.
Well, that's the episode. You can continue the conversation with us and the Hello Player community at discord.gg/glitch. And don't forget to subscribe to Hello Player on your favorite podcast app. Hello Player is produced by me, Ava Carr, Holly Harrison, and Ben Hansen of MinMax Studios, with music done by none other than Charles McGregor. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.